Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih banyak kepada Ibu Profesor Rofiqah Rohim. Untuk selanjutnya kita akan memasuki acara utama kita pada hari ini, yaitu guest lecture. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency the Ambassador of Spain for Indonesia, Mr. Francisco de Assis Aguilera Aranda. Her Excellency Dean Paris School of International Affairs at Siongspo and former Foreign Minister of Spain, Professor Arancha Gonzalez Laya. Former Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia and Senior Lecturer at FEB Mr. Hatip Basri, PhD. Director of Yayasan Kehati, Mr. Roni Megawanto. Executive Director and Head of Bank Indonesia Institute, Mr. Yoga Afandi, PhD. Vice Dean of Academics Affairs of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, Mr. Arif Wibisono Lubis, PhD. The Chairman of the Institute for Sustainable Earth and Resources, Universitas Indonesia, Profesor Jatna Supriyatna, MSc, PhD. The Director Magister Management, FEB Profesor Rofiqah Rohim, PhD. And respectable delegates, all the participants, my name is Doti and it is an honor for me to be here as your Master of Ceremony. Welcome to our guest lecture hosted in collaboration by FEB, BI Institute, and Kehati with the Climate Overshoot Commission with the topic, the Climate Overshoot Commission, reducing the risk of potentially exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. Before we start today's lecture, let me invite your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to come together to hear the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Ladies and gentlemen, for the national anthem, I invite us all to please stand up. Ladies and gentlemen, you are invited to return to your seats. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, to start our agenda today, Together, we will hear a welcoming speech from the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. For Mr. Arif Wibisono Lubis, PhD, time is yours.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. This works perfectly. Good morning to all of you, Your Excellency, Ms. Arancha Gonzalez Laya, Overshoot Commission, and also the Dean of Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po, Paris, France, and also the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain. Your Excellency, I believe that I think the ambassador has not come yet. Your Excellent, also Dr. Khalid Dinasti, the representative from Overshoot Commission, Professor Jatna Supriyatna, the moderator for today's event, Professor Rafiq Rohim, Pak Arfi, Excellencies, Department of Study Program Heads at FEBUI, also senior colleagues from FEBUI, the Spanish Embassy, and to all those attending here, students, researchers, all participants, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, peaceful greetings of all to us all. Good morning once again to all of you, and a very special welcome to Ms. Gonzalez Laya and Dr. Tinasti to our campus here, our Salemba campus at the BCA Auditorium, Master of Management Program. I hope that this morning we are all blessed with health and also optimism to start today's discussion. We are very honored to have Your Excellency, Ms. Gonzalez Laya, alongside all colleagues here today to the special guest lecture on the Climate Overshoot Commission, reducing the risk of potentially exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius warming here at FEBUE. I should also inform you that today's discussion is also part of the lecture series between FEBUE, BI Institute, as well as Kahati, today we are going to take the important theme on how to mitigate and prepare for a potential overshoot of the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming goal. The seminar series came to a fruition because of the hard work of and collaboration between FABUE, BI Institute, as well as Kahati. And we're very grateful for this collaboration because it has enabled us to explore key topics regarding climate change and the environment in Indonesia. Previous lectures have covered a range of topics from community action and well-being issues connected to climate change to the current regulatory context of green policies in Indonesia. The aim of today's seminar, with Ms. Gonzalez Laya's guidance, is to discuss the mitigation steps to anticipate a possible overshoot of the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming target, possible solutions other than emission cuts to reduce the risk of warming planet, and what role academia can play to support these solutions. The understanding about climate risk is also very important for FABUE students, as our missions is to cultivate future leaders with a sense of social responsibility and an ability to address global challenges. This is why this event is also held in conjunction with the orientation for a new student of Master of Management program. These key topics are very certainly very relevant for Indonesia, as Indonesia has continually presented strong views regarding commitments to reduce global warming. We know that based on the carbon brief data that was released in 2021, Indonesia was ranked as the country number 8 that contributed the most for carbon emissions. Our Vice President has just made a statement to emphasize that COP27 should become a platform, an implementation platform, and that Indonesia should lead just transition to clean energy. Our Vice President has also reinstated Indonesia's commitment to reducing emissions, expansions of nature conservation and restoration, the implementation of a carbon tax to achieve zero emission by 2070, the development of electric vehicle ecosystems, and the B40 biodiesel program. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues and participants, the climate poses intensive risks, yet opportunities may also arise for Indonesia as well. We know that our country, Indonesia, is an archipelago, and therefore rising sea levels is an imminent threat and real challenge. Despite risks and challenges within the process to transition towards clean energy, of course, there's, however, a silver lining. Indonesia has a numerous source of clean energy, such as geothermal power, solar wind, hydropower, and biofuels. As an example, Indonesia's potential solar power capacity can reach about 190 gigawatts, potentially enough to supply power to almost all off-grid areas in the country. Without clear guidance, we, however, risk missing these opportunities. And here is where academia can play a role. Working together with various parties, government, industries, and also other stakeholders to implement an NHELIX framework, a solution network, where research can be implemented to creating concrete solutions for a greener Indonesia is very important. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take up any more of your time as we're going to hear from Ms. Gonzalez Laya about these topics in more details. We are very grateful once again to have your presence here with us all at MMFABUE, and we hope that through the discussion today, we may learn from your experience on how to best support Indonesia's journey towards green, sustainable, and just society. Once again, a very welcome to you and also Dr. Tinasti from Overshoot Commission, and also to all of our audience. We are looking forward for a fruitful discussion this morning. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And I would like to return the floor back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arif, for the welcoming speech. Ladies and gentlemen, to lead the guest lecture today, we kindly invite the moderator to this event, Professor Jatna Supriyatna, PhD. Professor Jatna is the chairman of the Institute for Sustainable Earth and Resources, Universitas Indonesia. He is also the co-chair of the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network for Indonesia and the chairman of Perwaku, Indonesia Environmental Scholar Association. Among the many accolades Professor Jatna has received, his dedication to conservation and work concerning the environment has most notably led him to receive a distinguished award from His Royal Highness Prince Berhard of the Netherlands in 1999 as an officer of the Most Excellent Order of the Golden Ark Award. Professor Jatna has also received a prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award in the field of biodiversity conservation from Conservation International.
What it really comes down to is whether we are going to listen to the science. The science. The science.
Gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Professor Jat.
Very good morning, everybody. So excited. I like to invite Madam. So I like to Madam Arancha Gonzalez Laya. Is that spelling this week okay? Sorry, it's just the Sundanese. That is one of the tribe that is really hard to spell. I've been in French many times, but Spanish is also one of my really fun because when I was in New Mexico last time, my study, I really learned Spanish, so I try really hard. Anyway, so please to come to this. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and it is great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker, who will talk us about the current issue on climate change and the Climate Overshoot Commission. I think that is really, even I have been the last 20 years working on this climate change, but this is really the important part. How do we make sure that they will not be overshoot? I think that's really it. So, Madam Arancha Gonzalez Laya is the Dean of the Paris School of International Affairs. And can I read your biography? Your permission? She is also a member of the Climate Overshoot Commission, a group of eminent and independent global leaders who will recommend on effective, robust, and integrated strategy to reduce risk from possible overshoot of the Paris Agreement climate goal. I hope that everybody understand what that's really Paris Climate Agreement. So before joining PSAIA, Ms. Gonzalez served as a Spain Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation from 2020 to 2021. She previously was Assistant Secretary General of United Nations and Executive Director of the International Trade Center. Between 2005 to 2013, she served as Chief of Staff to the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Before that, she held senior position at the European Commission in the International Trade and Development. Ms. Gonzalez also started her career as a lawyer in the private sector. So you seem to be have been in the global more than in the country. So anyway, so before I let Ms. Gonzalez in the floor, I'd like to introduce our activity at the Universitas Indonesia. So we have a research center for climate change under the University of Indonesia, Universitas Indonesia, and we usually we have our center has been involved in researching, advising, and developing program related to climate change, especially the food security, health security, land use and deforestation, biodiversity, energy, finance, and mitigation adaptation policy. So that's really a very big topic for the center. But of course, we have been helping the government on even the policy on the economy related to the climate change. So I don't want to spend so much time talking about the Universitas Indonesia, but without further ado, I'd like to invite Madam to discuss and how that we cannot too much on developing, but at the same time, how do we get that we don't go to the overshoot and it will be disaster if we do it. So thank you. So we're gonna have that your time. I guess that I don't know 30 minutes, so you can do it, and then we can have a discussion with the student mostly here. So that the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor. Salam alaikum to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is a university. In a university is a place where you build leaders. That's what the university is about. And we need leaders today to deal with today's most pressing issues. We have a lot of pressing issues on our agenda. We call these pressing issues a polycrisis. We are still grappling with a pandemic. This is why we are still using our masks. A pandemic that affected every country on earth and that showed us how fragile our health systems are. Just as we were coming out of this health crisis, we saw a big war erupt in Europe. It's in Europe, but the impact is not just in Europe, because the impact is on food, on fuel, and on fertilizer prices, and this affects everyone around the world. And as if all of this was not sufficient, we also have a big rivalry building up in a geopolitical battle between the United States and China. And of course, this is not just about the United States and China. You know this very well. When you sit here in Indonesia, you know this very well. But when you sit in Europe, we know this very well too. Now, over and above all these different weaknesses that we have to face, we have one that is the most, in my view, important one to manage and to manage well, which is the climate crisis. And when I say that it is important that we manage and that we manage well, is because this is not a crisis, not only a crisis, it is an existential crisis. If planet Earth is different from other planets, there are other planets out there. But if planet Earth is different, it's because it allows for life to happen in this planet. And what allows life to happen in this planet is a very thin layer above Earth called atmosphere. If you go to outer space, this is what astronauts do, and you look at the Earth, you see this very thin layer that is what protects us. This very thin layer is today under attack, and it's under attack, as we just saw from this video, not just from nature itself, but from man and women made actions. And this is what this discussion is about. How can we together make sure that this very thin layer that protects life on Earth can continue to protect us? This is what we will try to discuss together this morning. Of course, I will share with you a few ideas, a few suggestions, but it would be very important also for me to hear what you have to say. This is a dialogue. This is not just me talking to you. This is also about you putting your ideas and your suggestions and your concerns on the table. This conversation to protect the atmosphere and to protect the Earth started long time ago. And it started with this idea that every country had to commit to reducing its emissions. It started in the 90s with a big climate conference that took place in Brazil. No surprise, Brazil, like Indonesia, is home to a lot of the solutions to address climate change, but it's also home to a lot of the risks around protecting the atmosphere. So we tried in the 90s to build a system of compulsory emission reductions by every country, and it didn't work. So in Paris, in 2015, we decided to take a different route. Every country would put on the table voluntary targets to reduce emissions. These targets would be ambitious. These targets would be progressive. And the sum of all these emission reduction targets would help maintain the increase in the temperature below 2 degrees centigrade and to the largest extent possible below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, 1.5 or 2% were not chosen by coincidence. They were not the result of a negotiation, okay, I give you 3 and you give me 2, and we settle on a figure. This is what science tells us will help us maintain our planet without irreversible conditions for our ecosystems and for life in this planet. So we all committed, all countries in the world committed to reducing emissions to keep the increase in the temperature of the Earth compared to pre-industrial levels. Professor, you tell me because you are the scientist in this conversation, to not more than 2%, and if 2 degrees, but if possible, to the largest extent possible, 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, this is what they committed, but if we look at what's happening, what is happening is not enough to keep to this objective. So what the science tells us today is that we are already at 1.2 degrees centigrade, and that by the end of the century we could be close to 3 degrees centigrade of increase. So we've got a problem. We are not doing enough, fast enough to keep within those targets. Faced with this situation, a group of people have come together to constitute this Overshoot Commission. The name is a bit funny. When I was told that I would be a member of the Overshoot Commission, I didn't really know what this meant. But what it means is if the temperature will shoot over 1.5 degrees, what can we do to prepare for this scenario? This is what the Overshoot Commission is about. How can we prepare for this scenario? Hopefully, we will not get there, but what happens if we get there? So the first thing to say is that in order to keep within this 1.5 degrees centigrade increase in the temperature, the best mechanism is to reduce emissions. So our first collective objective is to reduce emissions. Now, how do we reduce emissions? You are studying management, so you know that this is like organizing a big management plan. Every government has to have a management plan. Every company has to have a management plan. Every town has to have a management plan to reduce emissions. Sometimes the reduction will come from building constructions, houses that will be more energy efficient. They will not lose cold or heat. They will be built in a manner that they will not require lots of air conditioning or lots of heating. So parts will have to do with construction. Parts will have to do with how we manage agriculture. Parts will have to do with our energy systems, decarbonizing our energy, moving from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. Now, you know that this is a big issue today. When energy prices are so high, the temptation is not to decarbonize, but the temptation is to go for cheap energy, irrespective of whether or not it emits to. So we have to be very careful in our management plans to keep within this temperature. Energy, construction, vehicles. I was very happy, Professor, to hear that Indonesia is moving fast forward from combustion cars to electric vehicles, because this will also help reduce emissions. So all of these are the ingredients that we need to weave together to keep within those 1.5 degrees centigrade. A big management plan for climate change is what every country needs to have. But we know that the management plans today are not good enough. So first thing we need to make sure is that we keep going at emissions reduction. Now, we also need to get ready for a scenario where emission reductions are not working fast enough. What else can we do? So this is the purpose of the Overshoot Commission. We are going to be looking at 3 additional things we can all collectively do to keep the temperature within 1.5 degrees centigrade increase. First, mitigation. So, reduce emissions. If it doesn't work, two, adaptation. How can we better use the systems that we have in a manner that is less CO2 emission intensive? How can we do agriculture in a manner that will help us with emitting less CO2 or absorbing more CO2 in agriculture? Farmers in Indonesia are very important because they know using traditional means, using nature-based solutions, how to do that. So a big part of what we need to do now is help with investing more in measures to adapt to a less CO2 intensive production methods. Now, of course, part of it will be, let's say, frugal, but part of it will also require big investments, big public investments, big private investments. So a big part of what this commission will be looking at is how do we generate the investments that are needed for countries to adapt to climate change. And of course, many countries, including countries like Indonesia, who are already having to spend a lot of financing in their own development, in reducing poverty, in schooling, in healthcare, in infrastructures, will want to see additional means, not just recycling of the financing that exists, but additional means to help them adapt to climate change. So a big part of this conversation is about how do we invest more collectively in measures to adapt to climate change. The second type of solution that we want to look at is eliminating carbon from the atmosphere. How do we take carbon out of the atmosphere? There is a lot of carbon in the atmosphere already. And there are many countries that are responsible historically for having emitted this carbon that have a higher level of responsibility than others. But what can be done to remove this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? There are, again, frugal solutions, nature-based solutions to do that. Protecting mangroves, which is what you know to do here in Indonesia, is a good way to do that. That's on the frugal side. Doesn't cost a lot, but someone has to take care of that. But then there is a lot of space for technological investments in extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So this brings us into a different conversation, which is how can we mobilize the sharing of technology to extract carbon from the atmosphere. Some countries have developed technological solutions to do that. How can we make sure that these technological solutions can be shared across nations? Technology transfer. Again, how can we finance that? So we are going to be in the commission looking at how can we facilitate carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere. The third area, and this is a little bit more controversial, it's got to do with geoengineering. How can, at the end of the day, why does the Earth heat? It heats because we are damaging the atmosphere and the sun has a greater heat impact on the Earth. But what if we were to reflect this heat? So there are already geoengineering solutions that are looking at diverting the sunlight to reduce the heating of the earth. Now, you may think that we are like in a science fiction film. Well, we are not. This is happening already. There are people working, there are countries working on space-based reflection. So you have a space, in the space, you've got devices that are reflecting the sunrise rays. Or you inject aerosol in the atmosphere. It's a bit what happens when a volcano explodes, right? This is what we saw here in this part of the world. When a volcano explodes, it has particles in the atmosphere and it reduces sun rays on Earth. What if we were to do this technologically as opposed to just naturally with the explosion of a volcano? Or there are many different technologies that are being tested by countries, by companies. But here is the problem. This is being done without thinking of the consequences that this may have on others. So, what if I were to protect my space from the rays, and the sun rays goes and affects harder my neighbor? So, who's going to consider those risks? What is the governance mechanism that will decide where to use these technologies and where not to use them and to what extent to use them? So this is a very controversial um, area of work in the scientific commission, in the scientific community. Professor, I'm sure that you will have something to say on that. We do not have an international fora to discuss this particular issue. And this is, but it is a solution, but it is, in hypothetical terms, it's a solution, right? So what do we do about this? How do we weigh the risks and the benefits? Who does that? What governance mechanisms do we have to do that? This is also what we will be doing, we will be looking at in this Overshoot Commission. Not that we are technology experts, we are not scientists, and we will not be saying this is good or this is bad, but we may have to say, let's look at all these benefits, but also let's look at all these risks. And more importantly, let's look at where this gets discussed. Let's create some sort of mechanism where scientists, and not only scientists, if you're in a school of management, you know that very often the decisions are not just taken by technicians. They also have to include ethics. They also have to include sociology. They also have to include law. So we need to have a multidisciplinary debate about whether this type of mechanisms of solar engineering, SRM, what are the best circumstances for them to be used or not. All of this obviously is the menu that we have ahead of us. What we know is that this climate discussion is not a hypothetical discussion. It's a discussion that affects health. As we saw during the pandemic, the frontier between climate and health is a very tenuous frontier. So who talks about climate is talking about health. Who talks about climate is talking about agriculture and farming. Who talks about climate is talking about coastal communities. Who talks about climate is talking about poverty reduction. Who talks about climate is talking about economic growth. So, who talks about climate is in reality talking about how to maintain societies, economies, and ecosystems alive and in a sustainable manner. So we do hope with this Overshoot Commission to look into the next frontier for protecting climate change, not distracting attention from reducing emissions. Everyone still has to do emission reduction, but looking at other means to help us prepare in case emission reductions is not enough. Let me, before I turn the floor to you, and back to the professor, to tell you that what we are trying to do is not just talk among ourselves, but we are also debating and discussing with scientists, with students like you, with a young group of people around the world that are, in a way, helping us in making sure that the perspectives we will have on these three issues, um, adaptation, uh, absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, or geoengineering, is done with an intergenerational perspective. So we don't only look at where we are today, but what the world would look like for the next generation, including you. So thank you again. Thanks to the university for giving us the opportunity to dialogue on this issue that is our collective issue, but more than anybody else's is your issue because you're younger, and therefore this conversation is also about the future we want to have. Professor, floor back to you.
Let's give a applause for Madame Gonzalez. So, what I can say is that this is really big. It's not only a science, yeah, but across the globe. Seemed what Madam already mentioned about that science, of course, technology and geoengineering, it's there. But what that's really for Indonesia, for example, Madam mentioned about this coastal life, Indonesia with 17,000 islands, 2,000 by 2050 may be inundated, may disappear. So I was really, all these should be management things. How do we do it? To look at that not beyond what really things, because the government said we have NDC, nationally determined contribution, which now last year we're going up to almost 30%, even more than 30%, which is we're trying to get 900 million ton of CO2 in the atmosphere, in our atmosphere. But not enough, I think, what I hear from the Madam Gonzalez. Because there's so many things happen currently because of the war, competition, war attrition, and many others that maybe, that has to be predicted. So I think this is really important. So I would like to ask everybody here that what should we do about Indonesia? Because she challenged us, can we do something, beyond just government? Government, of course, they are really committed, but there are also other global issues that was really mentioned about, and others. So if anybody want to have a question or something to say about this, raise your hand. I saw the ladies there. One, then with two. I saw a lot of ladies here. So, all right. Yeah, your times, please.
Globally? Oh, sorry.
They're big industries in Indonesia or globally. They tend to manage things with like the finance more in expensive things. So they don't think about the carbon emission reduction. So how can we how can we teach them? How can we manage them? And like we need to think about the climate too, just not the inexpensive they inexpensive stuff, so they can make more money about it. So how can we uh, how can we how can we make it more how to say how can we make it more uh, sustainable, but also at the same time the economy still going strong. So sustainability, climate change, and also I want to ask about palm plantation in Indonesia. Is it true that the land of palm plantation cannot be reused uh, as other plantation, like like rice paddies, like some forests? That's it.
But
Excuse me.
what's your name?
My name is Rivka.
And the second question is from the ladies here.
Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. It's kind of very impressive speech from you. So, okay, my name is Tian. So, right here, I am a new student of this department. Literally, I'm excited. And then my interest in human resources management. So that's why we know that my academic background is from human resource management. So I'm excited to know about the best solution because we know that the top element of management, we know that human or man. So I'm excited to do some research regarding green human resources management. So it means that it is related to our topic today about climate overshoot commission and reducing the risk potentially exceeding 1.5 degrees warming. So I think what should we do as a youth? Because I'm a youth of Indonesia, and then and also as a representative of one of SDGs conference. So I want to know more about what should we do, because we know that even we do something more because we are a youth, and we do something more for a society or for our friends and for our list like a lot of people in our environment, but they don't think that it is something important to do because they want just to fulfill their life. So what is the best thing that you can advise to me as a youth or other people right here regarding this topic? So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. So one more that's here. Okay.
Good morning, madam. Thank you for your speech. My name is Thomas. My previous academic background is from forestry. I'm forest management. Uh, in my lessons in the college previously, I usually talk about how we manage the forest exploration and how to exploit forest products to meet our needs, human. Uh, and we also talk about the competition between palm plantation and the forest production, which is better, which is we need to help in the future. But one thing that keeps strikes in my mind is that uh, we already know and we already talking about palm and forest. We already talking about industrialized nation, but how can industry be convinced like this is like we are talking about overshoot, right? So there's a deadline, and then if you overshoot, what can be happen? But the way I see it, like maybe I have a limited background of reading. So, but in my it what I reading is how can we convince the industry to invest more to like not to do overshoot, how to prevent the overshoot. But currently, we already have like green movement, green industry movement. In the forestry, we already have a way more better use of our forest in a better way. Like maybe Indonesia still use many people rather than mechanical, like the harvester thing. So how can we uh, convince our industry to be, please put more money, please invest in this, please research. If they can say like, well, if the deadline is like 5 more or 10 more years, and then we overshoot, but our industry is safe, or our industry not really affected, and we still have customers, and well, we don't have anything to be frightened of from this overshoot. So what's the benefit for us? Or if we just talking about, okay, I will put money or invest in this overshoot handling, uh, then it will be just be my, let's say, good name for my company, for my branding. So what can we do about it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. So I think three it's enough, and then we can go after this discussion or dialogue. Madam, do you want to answer it?
So to Rivka's question, obviously the best way would be to have a carbon price worldwide. The question is how you internalize climate costs in the economy. Who pays for the costs? Normally, the, the cost is included in the price. That's how capitalism works, right? The price reflects the costs and then it includes a profit margin. That's capitalism. Now, where do we include the cost that is not an individual cost, but is the cost to the collectivity? Who pays for that? In which price do we see this? So if we wanted to be very effective in tackling climate change, we would have a price for carbon emissions. And this would be a price that would internalize the costs to our climate. But we do not have a carbon price. And we don't have a carbon price because some countries do not accept the idea that those costs are reflected in the prices. We've had a long discussion about this for 20 years in the international community. And we're not going very far. So we now have to go to the second best solution, or the third best, or the fourth best. And therefore, when you go for the second or the third or the fourth best, there's going to be inevitably good things and bad things. And this is where we live today. So, because we can't have a worldwide carbon price, some countries have decided to put a price on carbon. Europe has decided to put a price on carbon. That's what it has done. Now, of course, because Europe has put a price on carbon, it wants to make sure that it puts that price to products that are being imported from outside the EU, where this cost is not being taken care of. So the moment you go for a second best, then you have to go all the way to addressing the second best. So EU has a carbon price, and now the EU will have a compensatory mechanism at the border. They call it CBAM. You probably have heard about this, to make sure that they don't import pollution into the EU. Now, some countries would think that this is unfair because it is taxing their products when they come into the EU. But the EU would say, well, wait a minute. I mean, I am only doing what is responsible, which is making sure that I oblige my businesses to reduce emissions by putting a price on their emissions. Some other countries have decided this is not the way they want to go. So what they do is they put standards for businesses to follow. Or they pay businesses, they incentivize businesses to reduce emissions. The United States has recently adopted a so-called Inflation Reduction Act, a big climate change plan, where instead of having a carbon price, what it's doing is telling businesses, if you reduce emissions, we pay you a premium. We give you a tax rebate, or we give you a subsidy. So the problem we have today is that every country is doing it its own way. And when we have an interdependency, which is climate change, without a common mechanism, we start to see frictions. And this is what we are starting to see. So we have frictions internationally and we have frictions domestically. You have those frictions here in Indonesia. And let me describe some of these frictions without taking sides, because I'm not here to take sides, to say who's right and who's wrong. But let me explain this. You know that depending on the product that you plant, it has a climate impact or not. You know that forests are a huge carbon sink mechanism, that forests are a natural-based solution to reduce carbon from the atmosphere. But you also know that the returns from having a forest are lower than the returns of planting palm oil. That has negative consequences for climate change, but has important economic returns. So these are some of the frictions that you have internally, that you need to discuss as a society internally. And of course, in discussing those frictions, in my view, the most intelligent thing would be to look at fairness. Fairness for those who take care of the forests, maintaining the forests, getting a return that is fair compared to those who will have to reduce the production of palm oil or making it more sustainable. So these are some of the difficult conversations that every country has to have. And I know that these conversations are not easy. I know this is a similar conversation in Brazil. In Brazil, who has this incredible Amazon forest, and parts of the Amazon forest is being burned down in order to expand the production of soya or the grazing of cattle, which is more remunerative for the owner of the cows than the Amazon forest. So these are the difficult choices that need to be had. But this is a discussion where you young people need to weigh in also. Now, I do think that businesses have also understood that they will not be getting a good return in the future if they do not align to sustainability. And they will not do this for two reasons. One, because they will be hit by regulations by governments, but two, because they will be hit by consumer choices. And this is where you again, you young people, old people, consumers, have a choice. So again, my sense is that businesses have understood that they need to navigate sustainability that will make them more competitive in the future. More competitive in terms of contributing collectively to reducing emissions. At the end of the day, businesses also will be negatively impacted by the increase in emissions, but also they will be in the eyes of the consumers, and consumers are becoming more and more educated everywhere. This is what I see here in Indonesia. They will also be putting a premium on companies that behave in a responsible manner from a climate point of view. So there is a way, to go back to what you're studying, which is management, there is a way to be a good, solid, profitable business, but still be a sustainable business. And this is now what every business needs to make sure it meets bottom line with sustainability and also with respect for workers, and workers' standards and workers' rights. So to Diane, um, I think there is a big educational effort to be done in making sure that not only do we have good companies from a sustainability point of view, but we also have good citizens from a sustainability point of view, working to build the ability of individuals, citizens, to understand what's in it for them. Our behavior as individuals is also important. It's not just businesses. We also make choices. We make choices to consume. We make choices with our garbage. We make choices with our transportation. We make choices with our food, with our clothes. So it's human resource management that understands um, how to embed this sustainability, is climate, but is sustainability more broadly into the decisions they will be making in the company, in the public administration, in a university, whether you decide that the bottles of water are plastic, or whether you decide that they are recycled plastic, whether you decide that the cups of coffee or the mugs that you have are recyclable or not. All these are decisions that are driven by individuals. So human resource management that is sensitive to the role they have to play, in my view, is essential. Finally, I would say to all three of you that the difficulty we have with climate change is that it requires systems change. Systems change. So my advice to you as young people is not just a nice to have. It's not enough to protest. We have to protest. You have to protest. You have to make your voice be heard. But the goal should be system change. Because this is what will drive the reduction of emissions, is when we change the way the system operates today. So look for system change across the board. This is probably where I would put my money if I were you.
All right. Thank you very much. I think that's a lot of across the board this answer. But lovely that this has been discussed many at the university level. I like that. But also I think that we have never come up to the interdisciplinary approach. We always has, I'm a scientist and I'm always talking about here is numbers, they love numbers in scientists. But I don't know how the solution, because there is no economic solution, there is no political, social solution. So you always at the center, we always, wow, we have got all the numbers, excited the numbers. But then what that solution when the government said, your solution? I think this is really a lot of solution you mentioned about this, the commission, hopefully the commission can give us a lot of things, because you mentioned about the competition, the banning between Europe and many others. You mentioned about the forests and others. But that's really, I think that you mentioned about the system change. I love that. This is really, anybody have a burn thinking of this before? I think, do you know what time we have to finish? 11? So we still have 15 minutes, so that's good. Anybody want to contribute to any question? This is really important. So I see that somebody raised the hand.
So, good morning, Prof. Jatna, and good morning, Prof. Arancha Gonzalez Laya. So, first, thank you for this opportunity. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ivan Kristiadi Damani, and in this opportunity, I want to ask you about I want to know more about the concrete industry because in several years I have a research on sustainable concrete industry because my academic background is from civil engineering and I study here in Department of Management in University of Indonesia. So I want to ask you if there are some discussion or with your academic backgrounds from law and do you ever know about these topics and discuss this sustainable concrete industry topic in international level? So I want to know about the update that you ever thought about so that I would have further research on this, I think. So I just want to know a little bit. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, the ladies behind, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, Mrs. Gonzalez, and good morning, Mr. Jatnan. Let me introduce myself. I'm Laya. I'm a new student here, majoring in marketing management, and I would like to ask your opinion, Madam, about nuclear as a zero-emission clean energy resource. We know that somehow we hear a lot of its disadvantage rather than its advantage, and how we as the country to prepare it to be one of the solution to reduce the emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, please. Anybody want to? No one? Oh, yes, please.
Thank you, sir. My name is Reza. I have concern now Indonesia start for boost electricity vehicle than regular vehicle. But in 2021, the data said that 61% source in fuel in electricity is coal power plant. What do you think about it? And it's Indonesia make a great decision to boost electricity vehicle for now. And what alternative fuel for Indonesian? Maybe nuclear or anything else, but nuclear Indonesia I think is not that good because Indonesia in the ring of fire, a lot of earthquake in here. That's the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that's the time of yours, madam.
So let me start with the first question, which was about cement, if I understand correctly. So cement together with steel, fertilizers, these are one of the most energy intensive production processes, and therefore one of the production processes that if you do not decarbonize in the energy that you use is a big emitter. For example, in the European Union, it's one of the priority sectors where very specific targets on emissions reduction has been placed. Now, the question is, what do you replace the energy with? And it's a bit that I want to link this with a question about coal. Is how do you generate this energy that you need for the manufacturing of cement? Now, there is more and more technological developments in the sector. I mean, it's got to do first with what's your electricity, your energy mix in the country. But beyond the energy mix for the country or electricity generation mix for the country, you now have green hydrogen solutions that can help you with your manufacturing. So green hydrogen, locally generated, solar generated, to help you with your energy. This is one of the solutions that has a lot of potential, that is being tested in many countries already, for production of cement, fertilizers, and in steel mills. On nuclear, I live in a country now, my country of adoption, France, that has a big preference socially for the use of nuclear to generate electricity. But I come from another country, Spain, where socially doesn't have a lot of support for nuclear energy. So one, France is expanding nuclear production, is expanding nuclear reactors. Two, Spain is closing down nuclear reactors. The two are neighbors. The two are next to each other. The two are part of the European Union. The collective preferences in the country are different. So you have science, and science will tell you today that if you want to decarbonize fast and you want to decarbonize in a manner that doesn't hurt your competitiveness in the short term, maybe investing in nuclear is not bad. You then have scientific considerations of how good or bad your geographical location is for a risky sector like nuclear. But then you have the preferences of your citizens. We are democracies. Indonesia is a big democracy. So whichever choice it makes, it has to be a choice that citizens, not just scientists, citizens also can support. So in my view, this is a typical case of a sector that would lend itself very well to a national debate, given the implications that nuclear energy has. And I'm not taking any side. As I tell you, I live in a country that loves it, but I was born in a country that doesn't love it. And the two are next door neighbors. But this is an issue that both in France and in Spain has been long debated. And I think this is typically the issue that has to be subject not just to a scientific debate, but also to a citizen debate. On coal, I think I know it's tough, but this is like the low-hanging fruit, because the amount of emissions from coal is just too big. So for a country like Indonesia, that has entire parts of the country at risk today, not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, at risk today, exiting coal should be a priority. Now, the question is, what do you replace this with? It's not enough to say, hey, let's exit coal. So what do you replace it with? Here you've got geothermal that can work very nicely. You've got hydro, you've got wind, you've got solar. You have to make a decision on nuclear. So it's not that there are no choices. And you now have green hydrogen also to decarbonize specific industrial implants. So the choices are there. But what I would say is that what science is telling us is that coal is the low-hanging fruit we should all exit as fast as we can. Professor, I hope I was helpful in this debate. I want to leave you with a positive message, because I worry also that if the message that we are left with is one of desperation and no answer and no future, I'm not sure that's a very appetizing manner to incentivize your collective action. What I want is to appetize you to be actors. Governments and parliaments make laws, and laws and regulations are very important, but citizens move countries. Citizens are the ones that have power in their hands too. All of us are citizens. All of you are citizens. So be empowered citizens, pushing for what you think would be good for the future, understanding that the future, you have a bigger stake in the future than the professor and I, who are a little bit older. So thank you again for this great opportunity to discuss and debate with you. Take an interest in the Overshoot Commission. We will be releasing our recommendations in September this year, coinciding with the UN General Assembly. And of course, Dr. Basri, the Indonesian member of the Commission, I'm sure will have a big interest in sharing their recommendations with you. Now that you're prepared, then you can engage with him in September on the possible solutions. Thanks again.
Thank you, madam. I think let's applause for this. It is hard for me to conclude, but this is really important because it seemed to me what the question from the student when I teach the other side of the university, which is in Depok, because we have two university, right? Two part of this. So in Depok, we always the same thing. I thought that the many important thing is that across the border, the question seem to me is similar what I teach the science. It's so even this is most of those are background in economy and this marketing and some of them forestry, some of them engineering. But when the time that discussion about the climate change is always similar. So what I really mean is that maybe in the future, School of Economy, School of Science, School of let's try together to what Madam mentioned about it's not only geoengineering technological solution, but also nature-based solution, but also the social solution. So that's really very important. What the economic implication and so on and so on. That because currently in Indonesia it's so a weaver of demand of carbon price. Everybody's talking because Indonesia has the largest mangrove, maybe the largest peatland, so nature-based solution may be good. But it seemed to me that politically, socially, are not very tuned with those things. So I'm sorry that I have to say. But anyway, so I like this discussion, and hopefully the next future, I think the dean trying to invite more and not only for the economy but also invite others disciplines so that we're going to have very exciting discussion because for a long time at the university we are just only discipline to discipline. So I'm trying to get across my border as a scientist into the social and economical issue. So anyway, so without further ado, I think we have completely. The time is almost 11 o'clock. So thank you very much for everybody. Thank you, Madam, for it. Thank you, Ambassador, for coming to this session. And also thank you, Dean. So after ado, thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Professor Jatna, and thank you very much to Her Excellency Professor Laya for giving such an informative and interesting presentation. And now there is a souvenir that will be given by Professor Jatna to Professor Laya.
This is my book. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. An interesting presentation. And now there is a souvenir that will be given by Professor Jatna to Professor Laya. Okay, Professor Jatna and Professor Laya, we kindly requested that you remain stay. And now we would like to give tokens of appreciation for our speakers today. For this, we would like to invite our Vice Dean, Mr. Arif Wibisono Lubis PhD, and also the Director of MMFEBUI, Mrs. Rofiko Rohim PhD, to present this to our speaker. The next one is the certificate. And now we will have a group photo first. Oh, okay. And the other one is for Professor Jatna. And the certificate. Oh, Professor Rofiko Rohim, please. Once again, give the certificate to Professor Jatna. And now we will have the group photo first, yes, with Professor Rofiko Rohim and Mr. Arif. Oh, please, to the ambassador. And now we are going to have a group photo with all the participants. So please, to Professor Laya, Professor Jatna, and all, to join us in front of the participants. So for the all participants, please stand up. Yang sebelah kiri masih kosong, mungkin bisa diisi. Please take a place in front of the speakers. Okay, give a big smile. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. With pause maybe? Yeah. Okay, with pause. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much. Everybody may return to your seats. Dear all participants, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately this marked the end of our discussion today. On behalf of FEBUI, I would like again offer our sincerest gratitude to our distinguished speaker and moderator today. I would also like to apologize for any inconvenience that may have happened during the event. It's been a pleasure to host this event. We hope to see you in upcoming events. I wish you all have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. The next event will be held by another MC, Ibu Rininta. Oh, mahasiswa dimohon untuk tetap stay ya. Mahasiswa baru, oke. Mahasiswa baru kami mohon untuk tetap stay. Mungkin yang lain bisa untuk meninggalkan ruangan. Terima kasih.